что меня задержали? Я шел в кафе на Маяковской, хотел попить кофе. Понимаете? Подходит, говорят, пойдемте с нами. Я говорю, я в кафе иду, у меня вот встреча тут с девушкой. Мне говорят, пойдем с нами. Вот сейчас хочу выяснить, зачем, за что меня.
The criminals and the Russian government only steal money.
Какая разница? Ты туда, не говоришь правду, что ты пришел на митинг, сюда, понимаешь? Погулять пришли. Ты же врешь, согласись. Там праздновать, что ли? Походить?
Братец, просто на площади там казаки отдыхают. Там у нас просто атаманы. Какая-то провокация.
Пойдем с той стороны, надеюсь.
Я за тебя отведу куда-нибудь. Это же такое нарушение.
Я хочу пройти.
Иди отсюда, тебе сказали!
А полиция, а что вы стоите?
Чудо побои есть, иди сними сначала, чтобы заявление писать. Иди отсюда! Иди отсюда, пиши заявление, по-грузински пиши.
Полиция стоит, красавчики.
Also on the show tonight, the magic of Macron at the ballot box. The French president's political party is set to win a sweeping majority in parliament. But what about the 50% of the voters who are staying home? That story is coming up in about 14 minutes. We begin the day with the police waiting at the front door. That is what Russia's leading and loudest Kremlin critic, Alexei Navalny, discovered this morning. He had set his network of supporters into motion, organizing protests against government corruption in more than 180 cities. But when Navalny stepped out of his Moscow apartment building to join the crowds, the police arrested him and took him away. Now, this is not the first time authorities have tolerated protest planning only to confront the protesters with force and intimidation. And this is not the first time Navalny has been detained for daring to dissent. But as next year's presidential election approaches, each arrest reduces the likelihood that Navalny will ever be Putin's political challenger at the ballot box. Our coverage takes us tonight to Moscow.
They were headed to the Kremlin, but police blocked their way and arrested hundreds of them. Masses of young people took to the streets to protest corruption and the arbitrary decisions of their government. We want to change the situation that has come about where the power belongs to a group of bandits that is stealing money. They're pursuing their own interests, but not those of the people. And I want to change that so that people come to power who are interested in supporting the public. Jobs are being cut, and I'm scared because many people paid from the federal budget, like teachers and doctors, get very little money. Kremlin critic and opposition leader Alexei Navalny didn't even make it to the protest. He was detained as he left his apartment. His wife tweeted images of the arrest. He was then charged with disobeying police as well as participating in an unsanctioned protest. In an online video, Navalny called for nationwide protests and accused the government of corruption. His plea had millions of clicks. And that seemed to have an effect all across Russia, like here in St. Petersburg. Russia without Putin, they chanted. And here, too, the police acted with force. Hundreds were detained. Demonstrations also took place in Novosibirsk in Siberia and the Pacific coastal city of Vladivostok. Officially, today is known as Russia Day, but it has also been called the Day of Protest.
And our correspondent Nick Connolly joins me now from Moscow. He's been covering these protests for us today. Good evening to you, Nick. So what about the future of Alexei Navalny? Do we know what authorities plan to do with him?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, Brent. Obviously, Alexei Navalny has a suspended jail sentence hanging over him for an embezzlement case. So at basically the drop of a hat, that could be very quickly turned into a real jail sentence. Obviously, that was the calculation on the part of the authorities to really hope to put Navalny in such a difficult position that he would calm down his political activities. He's chosen not to do so since then. I think we're really going to just have to wait and see. I think the decision is likely to be taken by a very small number of people in the Kremlin.
There were protests there in Moscow and in about 180 other cities across Russia today. In terms of numbers, this appears to have been a successfully networked and organized protest movement involving a considerably large number of people. I mean, how much of a success were the protests today?
Well, we've come to expect a very impressive degree of professionalism in terms of the organization from Navalny's team, and the geography was certainly startling, from the Pacific, Vladivostok, to Russia's far west, Kaliningrad. That certainly is creditable. Beyond that, I think it's difficult to expect that people will come out once, twice, three times, and suddenly the government would give in to Navalny's demands. I was talking to one very young protester, I think he was about 19. He told me for him turning up was about normalizing protest, making it normal to come out irrespective of government bans and to voice your often oppositional opinions. For him, that was the point of coming out today, and I think that's probably how we should see it, as part of a bigger process to try and challenge the government rather than a one-off that will suddenly make everything turn around.
And Nick, speaking of challenging the government, how much of a threat is Alexei Navalny to Putin as things stand tonight?
Well, he's certainly the main threat from the opposition, and his anti-corruption, his investigations are very professional. That's definitely a thorn in the Kremlin's side. His staying power really is remarkable. He's been doing this against considerable opposition from the authorities for more than 10 years now. So that definitely is an issue. Also, his capacities we've seen today to bring young people out onto the streets, people who probably haven't seen anyone in charge of Russia apart from Vladimir Putin. That's something we understand has caused considerable worry for the Kremlin, and they are coming up with plans to try and woo the young people in big cities ahead of the elections. In terms of Navalny's ability to challenge Putin at the ballot box, that's a bit more difficult. The cards really are stacked all in the Kremlin's favor. They can still disqualify Navalny from the elections based on his existing criminal conviction for embezzlement. They can also, even if he does get on the ballot, they can keep him out of the mainstream media. They can put pressure on his campaign, withdraw or restrict campaign funding. So it really isn't clear how he would get into the Kremlin along the ordinary route.
Yeah. Nick, it almost looks like political theater in Russia right now. The Kremlin tolerates the protest and then crushes them. You've got police arresting the leader and then releasing him, and he goes on to plan the next protest. But that really, it can't continue as we get closer to the 2018 election, can it?
Well, definitely there's a lot of the cat and mouse game going on. I think it's probably quite unlikely that Alexei Navalny would still be free had it not been for all this international attention over the last few years in him. I think definitely there's no appetite here in creating a second Khodorkovsky, a political prisoner of conscience, someone that Putin would be asked about everywhere he went. Having said that, Alexei Navalny's brother has been in prison for more than 2 years now on economic charges that are trumped up on political grounds, his brother says. So that is also true. In terms of the election campaign, the bottom line is here, no one is going to say to Putin live on TV, what about Navalny? He can carry on going on in his own reality. Today, Russia Day was covered in the mainstream media with pictures from the Kremlin, awards being handed out, celebrations going on. So there's no real clear way how Navalny can really break through that wall and get into people's living rooms through the TV.
Very good point there. Our correspondent Nick Connolly on the story for us tonight from Moscow. Nick, thank you very much.